BioTech. And today I have my special guest. Of course, he is entrepreneur, 12 exits and 40 awards. Of course, also as an author and the author of the book, The Startup Life Cycle. None other than Mr. Gregory Shepard.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Welcome, Mr. Gregory on Entrepreneurship 101. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I can?
Sure, I am a serial entrepreneur, so I've done 12 startups, 12 exits, 4 private equity awards for transactions between 250 million and a billion. Sold 2 companies to eBay, became the chief strategy officer for eBay Enterprise. Then I've also co-founded the Fulbright Entrepreneurship Initiative, and I'm a Fulbright scholar and a TEDx speaker and the author of the Startup Lifecycle book.
Well, congratulations, Mr. Gregory, for all the things that you've done here on Entrepreneurship 101. We celebrate you with my cheering squad. Thank you. And today, let's talk about being you, a seasoned entrepreneur, investor, and of course, as well, an author. You build and sold 12 businesses across tech, transit tech, ad tech, and mark tech. That is extraordinary range of industry. What is the common thread, the skill or mindset that transferred across all of them? And what did you have to completely relearn with each new sector?
The life cycle of a startup is the same regardless of the industry. There are the time frame it takes to get through the stages in the life cycle can vary. Like if you're in pharma or in biotechnology or something like that, that requires approval from government. But largely, the process, the system, if you will, that startups go through is this life cycle. I did a 5-year research project on founder success and failure, and the book was the result of that. And one of the things that I learned in that process is that there is a normal life cycle of startups, and it is not, funding rounds. Everybody thinks that, oh, I'm a pre-seed company, I'm a seed company, and that's where they are. That's good when you're communicating on the outside to investors and that sort of stuff. But when you're thinking about your own business and where you are as an entrepreneur, there's a life cycle, and those things are things that happen during the life cycle. They aren't the life cycle themselves. I
Well,
think.
so,
Oh,
yes, go
sorry,
ahead.
sorry. I think that the common thread between these companies is both they're tech companies, so they have a very predictable life cycle without a really long tail, like pharmaceuticals, med tech, things like that. You have really long tails, really long life cycles. Things take a long time to get approved by the government, etc. Um, but in software form tech companies, it's a very predictable life cycle. So after I did the first couple, I just started getting better and better at doing the same thing and implementing the same strategies, which is all inside of the book.
Well said, Mr. Gregory. You grew up in poverty. You are a neurodivergent in a world not designed for neurodivergent minds. You defined an odds to build a remarkable career. What's a single moment or decision in your early life that you now look back on turning point? The thing that made you everything else possible?
I think I was um, on the path anyway, but I think the catalyst, the thing that really hit was selling 2 companies to eBay, winning all these awards, and getting on the radar of the whole startup economy. People starting to say, "Whoa, this guy has 4 awards for transactions between 250 million and a billion." The transaction with eBay was a cross-border transaction with 14 companies that was like nearly $1 billion. So that really got me on the radar. And then people started to really pay attention to the things I was saying and doing and what I was writing about, and everything came to life.
And congratulations for that, Mr. Gregory. You wrote the startup life cycle with the Penguin Random House. What is the one chapter in the book that you fought the hardest to include? The idea that, or the idea that your editors wanted to cut by, you knew was essential for the founders to hear.
Well, I wrote like a few thousand pages, and the book's only 250 pages. So I had to cut out a lot of stuff. The stuff that I had a lot of things that had to do with uh, paycheck to paycheck living, equality, how entrepreneurship surpasses race and gender, and even financial positioning, and opens up the opportunity for you for you as a founder to become uh, something that you couldn't normally become in other industries. So I spent a lot of time writing about that, and they cut all those pages out. so um, they only let me keep like two out of the, I don't know, I probably wrote 40 pages on that subject.
Mhm.
But, I published them as blogs. So, I still get my word out.
Well said, Mr. Gregory. You receive four private equity awards for transactions ranging from $250 million to $1 billion. Walk me through the deal that taught you the most, not the biggest or most profitable, but the one where you made mistake or almost lost everything.
Um, I had a startup. It wasn't part of this transaction, just another startup. But there was a moment where I had lots of close calls. One of them was when the dot bomb happened in the '90s, when everybody was buying stock in vapor, and and that really destroyed the market for a while, and it was really hard to recover. And then again, the 2008 recession happened, and when the 2008 recession happened again, it was like really close call. I had to lay off a bunch of people, move the office, and survive, that whole situation. Those are the two. I had another situation where I had a somebody that was in finance actually fraudulent transfer money to a shell corporation that he had set up, which really hurt things. So I had three really close nightmare stories associated with, dipping down to the bottom of the barrel and then climbing your way back up.
Well said, Mr. Gregory. You talk about altruistic capitalism. The phrase will make some people nod and some people scoff. Define it clearly. What is skeptics? How do you build wealth and do good simultaneously without undermining the other?
You can do well by doing good. So, in the case of startup science, so the startup lifecycle became a platform called Startup Science, startupscience.io. And startupscience.io is a place that founders can go. There's investors, there's grants, there's classes that they can take, there's discounts on software and services that they need, and all of that. My sort of process was to, you know, write the book. In the middle of writing the book, I was like, there's too much here. I need to build a platform to help founders. So then I built the platform to help founders, which now has almost 100,000 startups inside of the platform, going through different classes and reaching out to investors, et cetera, et cetera. I think that um, when I look back at my career, I think that one of the pieces of advice I would give to somebody that's a founder is pay attention to the signals. Just because you have a vision doesn't mean it's right, or it could be good but directionally wrong, meaning you have a good idea but you're pointing it in the wrong direction. So what I did well was listen to the signals. Listen to what people were saying when they were reading the book, and listen to people saying, oh, I really, I want this, I want that, I need to learn about this, I need to learn about that. During the process of doing the interviews, I did thousands of interviews with founders and investors and corporates and um, mentors and program managers and program directors, Navy SEALs, the first fighting wing of the Air Force, the SWAT teams, smoke jumpers from the fire department. I mean, I did a lot of research, and one of the things that I that kept coming up is this idea of paying attention to signals, things that are talking to you, but maybe not loud enough that you're paying attention. I think that that is a really a contributing factor to the things that I've done in my life.
You've led startups, turnarounds, cleanups, and roll ups. Which of those four is the hardest emotionally, and which is the hardest operationally? And if the founder come today, or it come to date and said, "I'm about to do my first turnaround," what is the warning you would give them that no one else will?
First of all, understanding what these things are. So a roll up is when you go out and you buy a bunch of companies and roll them into your company. A carve out is where you buy a company from another company or from the public markets, right? So you're carving one company out from a conglomerate of companies or from the stock market or something like that. You're carving it out. Does that make sense? So
Makes sense.
we've done the carve outs. Cleanups are where the books and records are bad, the operations are bad. It means the company's a mess, right? And a lot of them are a mess. So that's what a cleanup is. And then a turnaround happens after a cleanup. So if you have a company that's in a mess, you do the cleanup first, get the books and records and the governance and all that stuff straightened out. And then you move into a turnaround, which is where you go to market and really push revenue. So by pushing the revenue after a cleanup, you have a cleanup to a turnaround. So that in terms of which one is the hardest, cleanups are really difficult. If there's a track record of a founder, making mistakes, not, doing their corporate minutes, not keeping up with their cap table, maybe their financials are wrong, their data room is off, their operations are off, they haven't standardized or done any best practices. In those scenarios, you have to do a cleanup. That is definitely the hardest. The other ones are fun, but a cleanup is just awful. It's just not fun.
So, Mr. Gregory, you were shaped by humble beginnings. How does the origin story show up in your deal making today? Do you negotiate differently, treat people differently, or evaluate risk differently in someone who grew up with a safety net?
Um, yeah, definitely. It's easier once you've made money, you have a safety net. So that's definitely a lot less stress than, worrying about your business and worrying about your own personal self. That combination can be incredibly stressful for an entrepreneur. Um, I think that the experiences that I've had across the board, including the research and writing the books and everything, play a role across the board. When I'm an investor, I have 8 companies in my portfolio. When I'm an investor, I look at these deals from an operator perspective, from the founder's perspective, and that makes me a better investor. And when I'm an entrepreneur, I can look at these things from an investor perspective, which makes me a better entrepreneur, right? So having the diversity of experience and all this knowledge that I've gathered through all the research definitely contributes to my successes. And it's an entourage effect, meaning, you learn about one piece, you learn about another piece. It isn't 1 plus 1 is 2, it's 1 plus 1 is 10. So there's this entourage effect that you have when you start learning about different elements of the space, instead of just saying, oh, I'm an entrepreneur and I understand entrepreneur, or I'm an investor, I'm a mentor, I'm a provider, I'm a founder, whatever it is. You learn about those different angles, the lenses that those people see a business through, and that gives you a huge competitive advantage.
Well said, Mr. Gregory. I'm inviting you to please do come over to my book 101 review and let's talk about the startup life cycle over there. You've been featured in Forbes, Fortune, Entrepreneur, and the New York Observer. But you have also spoken at leading universities and conferences worldwide. Which audience is harder to impress? Fortune 500 executives or college students who are about to start their first company?
I would say, in terms of like, uh, if you are trying to, there's two things, right? If you're a student and you're trying to start a business, if you're a student and you're trying to build a brand, right? If you're trying to build a brand for yourself, mine kind of happened on accident. I didn't intend on building a big brand. It's when the eBay transaction went down, um, I just started getting emails and phone calls and chats from people that were asking me to do things. I started writing articles. I started posting a lot, and pretty soon I got TED calling me to do a TED talk, and then Fulbright. And I don't know if you know who Fulbright is. It's the largest, academic institute in the world. And then I co-founded the Fulbright Entrepreneurship Initiative as a benefit. So it's like things build on things, right? So I try to tell founders, and goes back to that entourage effect, is that something you do and you leave behind is a stepping stone for the next thing you do. So if you leave behind things and you don't take this collection of things with you to act as a stepping stone in the future, then you're leaving your opportunity behind. Everything you do is an opportunity to brand yourself or brand your business.
Brandon Dade, Mr. Gregory, you're a TEDx speaker. You have been on TV, radio, and top podcasts. What is the question you have been asked in an interview that you thought was lazy or uninformed? And what is the better version of that question that you wish they had asked?
Yeah, I've been asked, how is it possible that you could do 12 startups and 12 exits and do all the stuff that you've done? And I think a good question would be, what were the steps that you went through to to make this happen, right?
Yes.
Um, First of all, I work from 4:30 in the morning until about 6 o'clock at night.
Hmm.
I work on the weekends 5 hours, and on the weekdays, 12, 14 hours. So one thing is a lot of work, a lot of hours, just sitting there and cranking. Another thing is that the I always tell entrepreneurs, I'm like, it's time management and organization are key, and they're tied together. You can't do time management without organization. You have to be organized in order to do time management. So really, organization is really important. The next thing is what I call a handful of things. There's 5 things, one thing for each finger in your hand. And that's focus, the ability to keep your focus on something, drive, the ability to move forward, looking to driving towards something. Like if you're driving a car, you're driving towards something. So to choose that goal and have that focus and that drive, enthusiasm, which is the and contagious, right? So if you want to get other people to come along with you and build a team, you have to have enthusiasm. So that's focus, drive, enthusiasm, discipline. Discipline is the linchpin. When you don't want to do something really bad and you can make up every excuse in the world not to do something, that's when discipline comes up. And you go after it, even though it's something you don't want to do. In fact, I do the things I don't want to do first instead of last, to make sure that I treat those things that I don't want to do with the discipline that they deserve. And then the last one is optimism. And optimism is the biology of hope. If you don't have hope, how are you supposed to move forward at all? Right?
Mm,
People say hopelessness, right? That means
yes.
so you have to have focus, drive, enthusiasm, discipline, optimism. And if you have that handful of things, and on top of that, this organization component, then I think that, you'll be successful at whatever you do.
Beautifully articulated, Mr. Gregory. You have been recognized for transactions up to $1 billion. At that scale, the dynamic changed completely. What is the biggest differences between selling a 10 million company and selling a $500 million company that most entrepreneurs never see coming?
It takes a long time. The diligence process, the whole process of the transaction and the diligence itself is extremely difficult. Um, and you're not dealing with. There's no like selling. There's no like emotional like, hey, like when you're pitching for money, uh, you're trying to raise money from investors. There's a bit of salesmanship involved. When you're trying to get customers, when you're doing a lot of things, there's a bit of salesman. When you're selling a company uh, for a lot of money, it's all numbers. There's no, so it's just accountants and lawyers and stuff looking at either numbers or agreement terms, and that part is uh, for me anyway, it's extremely difficult and frustrating. And with a smaller transaction, you don't have that level of detail. They're buying, if the transaction's smaller, they're buying more of like what it can be. If the transaction's bigger, they're buying what it is now. So there are two completely different ways to handle that kind of stuff.
Mr. Gregory, you wrote the startup life cycle as a definitive guide from idea to exit. What is the most common stage where founders get stuck and cannot move forward?
What happens is in the vision phase, which is the first phase of the life cycle, what founders mostly don't do is spend the adequate amount of time doing research in the beginning. What they don't realize, and this came up over and over in the research, is that basically every time you make a decision during the vision phase, who your ICP is, who your ideal customer profile is, your persona, um, the product choices that you make, your go to market choices, the investors you take on, what you tell the investors, what you tell your customers, all of that stuff means that the walls start closing in as you start to move down the life cycle, meaning your optionality starts to go away. So a lot of founders won't do the research up front. They'll lock in their ideas and concepts early on, and now they're stuck in that hallway. They can't escape because they can't go to their investors without scaring them and say, "Oh, I made a mistake in my vision. I have to pivot." Or my customer is the wrong customer. I have to change that. So if you don't do the necessary research up front during the vision phase, this is the most common mistake that they make, is that they just skip over it and they just keep moving forward. And along with that is the concept of following the vision instead of following the vision augmented by what the customer says. A lot of times I tell founders, your vision is as good as until you start to talk to customers. And once you start to talk to customers, then your vision is not the point. It's the customer and what the customer wants that becomes the point.
Well said, Mr. Gregory. And to wrap up our discussion for today, you talk about perseverance as a core theme in your story, but perseverance can also look like stubbornness. How do you know when to persevere through resistance versus when to pivot or walk away?
So I think it's important first to define what a pivot is. So a lot of people think that a like investors will be like, "Oh, you're pivoting." No, a pivot is where you're changing your ideal customer profile or you're changing your product completely. An iteration is where you're making small adjustments. So if we're talking about a pivot, a full pivot, this is almost always the victim of the entrepreneur not doing the necessary work in the vision phase. Because if you do the necessary work in the vision phase, you shouldn't have to pivot because you've already made the decision whether or not you need to pivot, during the process of doing the vision phase research. Like you would have found the thing out that causes you to pivot before you have to actually say, "Oh, I have to pivot." Does that make sense?
Makes sense, Mr. Gregory, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your book, your business, or anything you want to promote on Entrepreneurship 101?
Sure. So the startup life cycle is the book. It's in Amazon and Audible. It's in all the bookstores. My website is gregoryshepard.com. That's GregoryShepard.com. And startupscience.io is the platform that we have for founders, accelerators, incubators, advisors, and investors. Thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
You're most welcome, Mr. Gregory, and please do support Mr. Gregory, because if you support him, for sure, more and more startup life cycle will rise. I have one more question, Mr. Gregory, before I will let you go. You have achieved what the most entrepreneurs only dream of: multiple exits, a major book deal, speaking stages, and financial freedom. What is the question you are still trying to answer? The one that keeps you working, learning, and showing up every day instead of retiring to the beach somewhere.
I think that, when I originally left eBay, I went to politics, and I was trying to move money down to startups because startups evolve our world, right? Everything from the Riverside platform we're on to the mic that you're using to the computer that we're on right now came from founders. Even the
Yes.
cars, if you go back to Henry Ford, even back that far, he was an entrepreneur. So everything that moves our world forward, that keeps peace between the people and evolves the way that we live, learn, and take care of the world that we're in comes from entrepreneurs. What gets me up and drives me in the morning is that this is a way for me to help. I couldn't help in politics, but I can help here. So that's what my driving force is.
Definitely. So, Mr. Gregory, again, thank you so much for your time. And I have one more question. Do you want to be like Mr. Steve Jobs, the late Steve Jobs? Because I saw you at the background, the picture of me, the late Steve Jobs.
You know, I don't want to be like Steve Jobs. I think he had an incredibly difficult life.
True.
I think that yeah, I like Richard Branson actually. He
Hmm.
seems like he's having fun. you know,
Definitely.
Steve Jobs never seemed like he was having fun, but Richard
Yes.
Branson seems like he's having a good time.
Yes. I think Mr. Steve Jobs always have furious life. But anyway, Mr. Gregory, thank you for your time. And please do come over on Book 101 Review and let's talk about the startup life cycle. I'm going to invite you tonight. Marticam people, see you soon.